Okay, everybody, we've been through the score now. Season 6 of Friendship is Magic, I think, was the point where I think everybody would agree this was when the show started to, tank a little bit. It was kind of the first time that we were kind of, expecting the worst. Since, up until this point, it's now been 6 seasons. Every episode on this list, I'm now going to hold to a higher standard. The first 3-4 seasons, I was okay with certain episodes, but from here on out, whenever there's a bad episode, it's really inexcusable, and there's literally no excuses for it. It's the 6th time we're doing this. We all know this deal. Counting down every episode of the season from worst to best. Let's get into it. The top 24 My Little Pony Friendship is Magic episodes of Season 6. Number 24, Flutter Brother. I made a 45-minute review explaining why the episode sucks. And for the longest time, it was one of my longest reviews ever since. But yeah, I don't need to say what everyone else has said about the episode. Zephyr Breeze is an unsympathetic, insufferable, pompous twit. If I was looking pity for him, I would have said something a lot more colorful. And when I was supposed to feel sorry for him, I felt sustained. And by the end of the moral, when the moral came out, where the episode tells us that Zephyr is smart and talented, but never showed it, I really could care less. At that point, I was just waiting for a brick to drop on his head, and him coming back in Season 9 proved that he's just as insufferable as he is now. He is still an awful character, and you're not going to get me to change my mind. So yeah, I don't need to say what everyone else has said about this episode. It is still garbage, and Flutter Brother is still the worst episode of Season 6. Number 23, 28 Pranks Later. Now, I will give this episode this. I liked the whole idea of Rainbow Dash pranking Ponyville until the point where it got out of control. But as I said in the review, a lot of my frustration and anger for this episode came out of missed potential. Because, number one, pretty much every character was acting like their Season 2 self. The moral is honestly very disingenuous and half-assed. Almost it makes it feel like I'm watching the mysterious Mare Duel all over again. And on top of that, a lot of the jokes in the episode, or the pranks in this case, were, number one, not really all that funny, and whenever they tried to do a prank, Rainbow Dash would end up explaining the joke. And as I said in the review, as Mark Hamill's the Joker would explain, if you have to explain a joke, then there is no joke. Like I said, I did like the idea, and I did like the horror atmosphere, since, as I said, the title of this episode is a parody of the horror movie 28 Days Later. So, I like the idea, which is more than I could say than Flutter Brother, which is why it's still better than Flutter Brother. But yeah, it's still not a good episode. Number 22, Every Little Thing She Does. This one hurts me because initially I did like the episode, and honestly it was in the top 10, but honestly over time, as I got older, I realized that at Starlight was going backwards. Obviously with her, the episode did start out strong. Like the first couple of minutes definitely were positive, and it's a lot more than I can say than the last 2 episodes. But the moment Starlight used the brainwashing spell on the main 6, excluding Twilight, it felt like that she was going backwards. And that she basically put a price on friendship. I do like the fact that she does end up getting called out for this, which is why she does get called out for this, and this episode is higher. But it's like, you kind of know where it leads to, and it's really not all that enjoyable to see the brainwashed main 6 and seeing Starlight go back to her old ways, where she's already had a lot of central focus episodes up to this point in the season. So yeah, used to like this episode, but not anymore. Number 21, Flame Shields Up, Stranger Than Fanfiction. Yeah, I'm sorry, I really don't like this episode. This is another one of those episodes like It's About Time and One About Discord where I've only seen it once. However, this was actually one of the few episodes of the show where upon first watch, I never finished. Obviously, part of the reason why I hate it wasn't because of Quibble Pants. Now look, I understand that the whole episode and the allegory of the Daring Do convention was a standout for BronyCon and the entire Brony community. However, the moment I saw Quibblepants do the comparison saying, the first 3 books are great but the rest are shit, I immediately was just turned off by his character. Because I am one of those people in the fandom that take things as they come and still watch the show because I enjoy watching it. The whole allegory of, oh, the first 3 seasons are good and the rest of it are shit, I think is an absolute total lie. And honestly, the whole Daring Do adventures, and even though I did like that Quibble eventually did come around, I just didn't like him, and he was just an absolute turn-off for me, and it basically almost ruined the episode for me. Now, like I said, the Daring Do action does get a little bit more exciting when it's not focusing so much on Quibblepants' pessimism, but again, I really just do not like the fact that this episode has to go in the fandom and goes in the direction of Quibblepants being those in the community that think, oh, the first 3 seasons are great, the rest are shit, well, I'm basically Rainbow Dash where I just take everything as they come. This was an episode that I felt like was personally attacking me because of Quibblepants, and this was one of those episodes that I just couldn't get into, and I just couldn't even finish the episode until I had to review it, until it was one of the few episodes where Copyright Strike couldn't claim me down, and I had to review it twice. So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't like Stranger Than Fanfiction, and you're not going to get me to change my mind. Number 20, The Cart Before the Ponies. While I did like the whole Wacky Races idea, and honestly, as somebody who did watch Wacky Races on Boomerang, I liked the idea, but this was another one of those episodes where for some reason all the adult characters were basically inconsiderate morons, and the Cutie Mark Crusaders were basically put into a bind. And this was another one of those competition in episodes on Rainbow Dash and Applejack, but also throw Rarity into the mix. It basically also boiled down to them basically doing what they wanted to do and ignoring what the Cutie Mark Crusaders wanted, and it was something I really just couldn't get into. That being said, there were a couple of jokes in the episode that I did find myself laughing at, especially Rarity's backstory of how she got second place to Derpy Hooves, and there were a couple of jokes I liked here and there, but it was just one of those aggravating episodes to watch because it felt like that the 3 grown sisters were basically going backwards in their character development, and essentially they were just complete inconsiderate morons. So that's basically why The Cart Before the Ponies is in the bottom 5. Number 19, Newbie Dash. The concept of Rainbow Dash finally getting into the Wonder Balls was something I was looking forward to, and then the entire second act almost causes this episode to entirely faceplant. Now, obviously, what at least keeps this episode out of the bottom 5 is that the Wonderbolts do acknowledge that Rainbow Dash is one of the best flyers, and they do understand the talent that she has, and that they've been waiting for her forever to be a part of the Wonderbolts. However, with the combination of Rarity and Twilight encouraging Rainbow Dash to shine in that horrible cringe comedy second act, and the Wonderbolts not putting 2 and 2 together and being kind of inconsiderate to Rainbow Dash and not taking her feelings into account, especially with her origin of why she was called Rainbow Crash, and even more so her backstory of poor adult supervision of the backstory teacher, who I assume got fired for her job because of it. It was just one of those episodes that is a bit hard to watch. It started out strong, then the second act basically caused it to basically almost hit the side of a mountain, but then it did kind of pick itself up in like the last few minutes, which is why Newbie Dash is still out of the bottom 5, but it's not that great of an episode. Number 18, Applejack's Day Off. As I said in the review, this is one of the most this was without a doubt one of, if not the most boring episode of the entire show. The fact that Applejack basically tries to relax and does anything and everything not to relax, and then having to make everything so much harder for Twilight and Rarity for many different occasions. Honestly, this episode was so boring, I literally could be thinking about doing like a million other things than watch the episode. It was that boring. But, as I've said in other seasons, I would rather have a boring episode than an insufferable episode. There's not much to talk about with Applejack's Day Off, other than just being a retread of Applebuck's season back in Season 1, only shittier. But I still think there were a couple of things I did find myself laughing at, and I did get the message behind it, which is more than I could say than the bottom 6, but I still don't like the episode. Number 17, Viva Lost Pegasus. Obviously what I like about this episode is the additional world building of MLP's version of Las Vegas being Lost Pegasus. Having Fluttershy and Applejack be the ones to work together to solve the friendship problem, what's going on, and finding out the mysteries behind basically Lost Pegasus and meeting up with the new pony Gladmane. And it's actually one of the few times where we actually see Applejack work with the Flim Flam brothers, who for the first time are at each other's throats. And I did like how they tried to work together, and we basically found out that Gladmane was basically a con artist who basically couldn't gloat. And I do admit, while his downfall was definitely predictable, since honestly the whole basically reveal your entire plot while one person is holding a megaphone revealing the truth, I literally saw the same thing happen in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, if you know that episode. So I kind of knew it was going, but definitely seeing Gladmane's downfall was definitely gratifying. That being said, what keeps this episode very middle of the road is that we know that Gladmane had ulterior motives and is yet another new character who basically turns out to be a bit of a scumbag, and yet for whatever reason, unlike Sven Gallop, he is never seen or mentioned again. And the only benefit to that is that it actually gave me some good fanfiction ideas. But yeah, because of Gladmane, this episode's pretty middle of the road. Number 16, On Your Marks. Basically the first episode of the Cutie Mark Crusaders of what happened after they got their cutie marks. I do like how Apple Bloom tries to find out what she has to do and tries anything and everything when it seems like the Cutie Mark Crusaders are breaking up now that they have their cutie marks, but then having to discover to help ponies try to find their talents. That's really all I can say, because I will admit, the main problem with the episode and why On Your Marks doesn't crack the top 15 is that the plot's all over the map. In just 22 minutes, the story just basically jumps from one thing to another, from the Cutie Mark Crusaders not knowing what to do after getting their cutie marks, to this really cliche third act breakup with Apple Bloom becoming incredibly paranoid, to helping out a pony with troubles with their main talent of trying to help ponies discover their true talent. It's basically like I have no idea what the hell is going on in this episode. But that being said, and I did like how the Cutie Mark Crusaders were able to quickly make up, because they knew that the story was really all over the map. So it was really a confusing episode, but there was some part of it that did keep it out from, let's just say, being one of the more bottom tiered. So this is an episode that's like very middle of the road. Number 15, Flame Shields Up Again, Dungeons and Discord. Maybe it just might be because I'm not the type of person that plays Dungeons and Dragons, and I know that game series like Fire Emblem or Dragon Quest are kind of similar to Dungeons and Dragons, but like, it's just one of those games that I couldn't get into, and it was an episode that wasn't for me, but I will acknowledge why it is actually a good episode. For one thing, having the guide characters, Spike and Big Mac, be the central focus to get Discord involved, and him actually slowly warming up to playing Dungeons in Discord, really gave us a really satisfying payoff. And on top of that, just seeing a lot of the jokes in the episode, not just from Discord, but also the fantasy jokes, like the Legolas joke of him becoming by the end, and Big Mac being, like, I think the warrior guy from Skyrim, because I honestly don't play Skyrim at all, and Spike being the wizard, or Gandalf. Like, I did get a lot of the humor, but because I'm not the type of person to play Dungeons and Dragons, it's not really my speed. But at the very least, I do get people why I think it is a good episode, and at least those positives does keep this episode in the top 15. Number 14, Where the Apple Lies. This is an episode that I'm conflicted with. On the one hand, I did like the backstory of basically Applejack and Big Mac's relationship in the past, of Applejack actually ending up lying in the first place, and why Big Mac actually used to talk a lot. So I did like the whole idea on paper. In execution, it is one of those episodes that is very predictable, but the predictability is not fun. And I understand, like, the whole framing device of Apple Bloom being caught in the lie with the relationship of Filthy Rich, and having the entire episode basically taking place in flashback land. I get why that's the case, but it was like, and I understand what the episode was trying to teach, is that if you tell a lie, it's going to gradually get progressively worse and worse until there's a situation it gets completely out of control where you expect the worst. I get the motive behind the episode, but it really just was an episode I really was just not feeling, because you kind of know where it leads. And also finding out Filthy Rich being basically boyfriend and girlfriend with Spoiled Rich, and he is just as kind of as unlikable as her inconsiderate wife, who I'm surprised didn't file divorce papers after Crusaders of the Lost Mark. I do like the concept of the episode, and I do think it is good, but if you're willing to stomach a very long string of predictable white lies, even though that is the point of the episode, you might get into it. Number 13, Spice Up Your Life. This is an episode that I really want to like. The expanded culture of Sapphire Sprawn and her dad. The It's Gonna Work song, I think, is very, very catchy. And on top of that, with the mix of Bollywood-style music, it made it all the more exciting. And then this leads to a reason why this episode's not making the top 10. It's because Rarity is completely out of character, as she's in constant fights with Pinky, trying to make everything exactly the same way as in Caroline. And on top of that, the possibility of Rarity being a potential racist in this episode is very much on display, and shifting all the blame onto Pinky, and then Zesty Gourmage being, well, a straight up bitch. And everything has to be her way. It's either her way or the highway, essentially. And I know that Rarity does eventually turn around, and she does end up calling her out for it. Yet, much like Svengali and Gladmane, we never see Zesty Gourmage again. Because I'm sure the rest of the food critics realize that she's kind of a bitch. Now, like I said, a lot of the fun atmosphere, if you ignore Rarity's possible racism shown in this episode, and Zesty Gourmage being one of the least interesting antagonists that makes Mentor G seem like a more credible guy, you will actually like this episode if you're very interested in the Bollywood-esque and the tasty treat, and also the dad just being a laugh riot in this episode for me. Number 12. Top Bolts. Honestly, the Top Gun reference kind of went over my head, but it was definitely interesting to see a friendship episode that focuses on Twilight and Rainbow Dash trying to solve the problem, with Rainbow Dash now becoming part of the Wonderbolts, and how she's well respected, even though Spitfire, I do have to dock this episode points for not understanding why Rainbow Dash can't seem to solve the friendship problem, but I do like how Rainbow Dash and Twilight tried to come out with two different approaches, and were able to come together to help solve the friendship problems. And now that I kind of know about Top Gun, I did like the reference. And so, overall, it definitely was a great friendship episode. Not one of my favorites, but it is still a good episode overall. Number 11, The Gift of the Mod Pie. Hey, honestly, this is the episode that actually was another one of those returned back to one of the mod-focused episodes, but by this point, I definitely liked her sense of humor a lot more compared to her initial first episode, and seeing how much of a great sister she is for Pinky, and Rarity also being there to try to find her own fashion, a store in Manhattan. And then also getting back at the sleazy con pony that traded Pinky's party cannon. And I really like a lot out of the movie elements of the pan shot from Rarity over to Mod. I definitely like those aspects, and this was actually one of the episodes I used for my film class in freshman year, an example of how the show uses a lot of movie camera works. So it is a very, very good episode and kind of shows the dark side of Manhattan, where people basically scam and con people, and it is still a very good and funny episode on top of it. Number 10, The Crystalling. I think, to be frank, as far as season premieres go, this one's probably one of my least favorite. It is still a good episode overall, but here's the thing I will give this episode. Obviously, one of the things I did like was how Starlight was slowly starting to come around to learning her lessons on friendship, was reuniting with her old schoolmate, Sunburst, and then finding out the truth about him, and basically having her put her differences aside and then getting Sunburst to realize he had more than he realized, and also the idea of the birth of an alicorn after following up from the one that Pinkie Pie knows of Cadence and Shining Armor having their baby, is definitely it's still a very good episode, but what makes it one of my least favorite premieres and why this episode barely cracks the top 10 is that the major plot hole of how Celestia and Luna, alicorns mind you, don't know how a baby alicorn is birthed, considering that they have thousands of years of experience, and the actual journal of the two sisters gives them a lot of insight, number one. Number two, the citizens of the Crystal Empire are all complete and total douchebags and morons who don't know that they're about to die in the freezing cold. And I will admit, I have come around on Flurry Heart since her debut appearances, but it felt like that her debut appearance in the premiere episode, it felt like nothing more than a contrived plot convenience just for the episode to get going, where there really wasn't any central focus villain at this point, since by this point, when all the villains were either put away, tied up, or reformed. It felt like one uncontrived plot convenience for Flurry Heart on her first appearance, but I did come around on her and the episode, which is why I can be gracious to get into the top 10. Number 9, the Saddle Row Review. I really like this episode a lot because it gives basically a lot of different insights of what the main six has to go through to help Rarity set up her new shop in Manhattan. And I really like how the main six tried to do what Rarity wanted to do, but because Rarity trusted her friends enough, they did eventually come around. And there really was just a lot of jokes and a lot of memes in this episode that just cracked me up, that I just couldn't help but laugh. It is a very, very fun, solid episode, and as Rarity put it, no spoilers. I'm surprised that joke hasn't been used in years to come. Number 8, No Second Prances, aka the episode in the season that I like but everybody else hates. Basically, this episode confirms what I knew since Magic Duel, that deep down in my heart, I really didn't believe Trixie didn't deserve that second chance. And Twilight being concerned, and while being overprotective of Starlight, is absolutely justified. Now, I will admit that Trixie does, after making a huge mistake with Starlight, does own up to this fact, and does own up to her apology this time around, and I found it more believable than I did with Magic Duel, because I definitely felt the guilt more in this episode than I did in Magic Duel. And I understand that a lot of people say that Twilight is out of character, but honestly, given how half-assed her apology was, I felt like that Twilight's concerns about Trixie the Starlight were absolutely justified. But I do like that eventually Twilight does come around on the Trixie, but it'll take a lot more episodes to do so, and some episodes made me led to believe otherwise. Number 7. PPOV, Pony Point of View. Obviously, this is the episode that shows that friendship can be challenging, and while there is the cliched misunderstanding and getting all different sides of the story, is the moral that kids need to understand, where it is very tough that even the best of friends can have some legitimate fights. And the journey is all the more great. Seeing all three of the different stories and see how everyone perceives who was at fault here, it definitely made it all the more funny to me. And Twilight being able to connect the dots of what all the stories had in common to get the conclusion, I honestly found was very creative and clever. So, honestly, I really do enjoy the episode, and while it is predictable, it's actually one of those episodes where the journey was actually really fun. Number 6, A Heartwarming Tale. Legitimately MLP's version of A Christmas Carol, considering the fact that For Whom the Sweetie Bells Toll did this idea, but this episode actually had that different story. And also is another one of those episodes that has a musical, but much like I can say A Muppet Christmas Carol, it definitely basically had an idea of having the songs keep the story moving forward, but since by this point there have been so many versions of A Christmas Carol, you kind of know where it goes to lead to. And while basically, obviously, the Ghost of Christmas Future part for the show, it doesn't obviously get to that point, but just seeing just a very, grim future is just as dark outside of Ebenezer Scrooge, or Starlight in this case, well, dying. But overall, it was definitely a fun Christmas episode that I really got into and definitely celebrated the spirit of the holidays, and quite honestly, it's probably my favorite Christmas episode from the show before the actual holiday special, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So overall, still a very good episode, and probably the best Christmas episode out of the show. Number 5, Gauntlet of Fire. Basically, we finally get to see the Dragonlands, even if we have to see the return of Garble. And basically, Garble's still proven that he's a cliched bully piece of shit. But with all that being said, the introduction of the Dragon Lord and the introduction of Ember, and being one of the most badass female characters that the show has given us. I do also like that Twilight and Rarity mostly stay out of the way from getting involved with Spike's journey, as he has to be a part of the Gauntlet of Fire to become the new Dragon Lord. And I really like how he helps out Ember through his relationship and how the two were able to team up and basically not only have Ember prove that she's a very capable leader, but also having Spike's friendship wore off on Ember, and the two are able to come together and essentially put Garble in his place. And the action was very exciting. It is one of the most action-central focused episodes that's not a finale or a premiere that got me all excited. And just seeing the lore of the Dragonlands, it was definitely one of the most enjoyable episodes of the show. And honestly, it was very satisfying for the payoff to be. And then essentially Spike be a minister, to still be living in Ponyville, but be a minister for the Dragonlands, showed a lot of promise, and it made me a lot more to look forward to from the Dragons, and showed that there are good characters in the Dragons outside of Spike, and they're not just generic bullies. Number 4, To Where and Back Again. I know there are people out there that don't like this finale, but I really definitely liked it. Mostly because that, for one, this is a finale where the side characters are actually the ones that have to save Equestria. The return of Queen Chrysalis was a surprise, but she was able to come very close to succeeding when kidnapping all the powerful magic figures, and Starlight has to put her lessons of friendship to the test by getting Discord, Trixie, and Thorax basically being MLP's version of Suicide Squad, and basically have to work together to save Equestria, since there's really nobody else who can save them. And even though Chrysalis does end up being defeated by the power of love yet again, we see that Starlight's lessons are actually end up taking shape when she's the one that gets Thorax to save the day. And for once, Chrysalis is not necessarily reformed. She actually ends up staying evil, and while it is kind of stupid that the heroes end up letting her get away, it is something that I really didn't see coming, because I kind of expected the show to have Chrysalis be reformed like Starlight and Sunset Shimmer, but the fact that she shoves Starlight's hope away and ends up getting away and still the evil showed that there was still a lot to do. So honestly, I really like this finale. Again, not as great as Twilight's Kingdom, but I still enjoy it. Number 3, Buckball Season. This was probably a very good episode, because not only did it introduce the sport of Buckball, but it basically gave a very strong lesson of how some kids and young teens that are going through sports in both high school and college, some might not be in it for the competitive nature to be competing, but just do it for the sake of multiple modes, rather to have fun, building friendships, or just generally try to lose weight. And I think that this episode definitely does a great job in doing so, and that Applejack and Rainbow Dash's competitiveness, they're not out of character, especially when approaching the characters like Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie. And even Fluttershy's outburst when explaining to Rainbow Dash and Applejack why they don't want to play anymore, while it does break my heart, it still cracks me up at times. But I was going through some personal issues at the time that basically made it feel home for me, and that's why I really like this episode. So, yeah, I think this is probably one of the least talked about episodes of the season, and I think it should be appreciated a little bit more. Number 2, The Fault in Our Cutie Marks. Obviously, this is the episode that introduces the sweet bottle of joy of Gabby Griffin, and her wanting to be a part of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, but then gives the sad truth and reality that Griffins can't get cutie marks. And yeah, this is also the first time where we actually get to see a Griffin character who's essentially not an asshole. Oh, I really love how the Cutie Mark Crusaders do anything they can to try to help her, but they're unable to do so. But by the end, they're still able to make Gabby an honorary member of the Cutie Mark Crusaders and be kind of their messenger for Griffinstone. It is just a bucket of fun episode, and Gabby is a precious, precious Griffin in the world that deserves all the joy and happiness, and if anybody tries to hurt her, I will kill everybody in the room, including me. And the number 1 best episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 6 is The Times They Are a Changeling. Basically, this was the episode I basically finally came around on Spike. Well, obviously after the introduction of Sven Gallop, obviously. But this episode definitely dealt a serious subject matter and basically showed that not all the changelings are necessarily evil, but through the perception of the Crystal Empire, they're all viewed as still evil. While I do think in children's media there are other episodes that handle racism a little bit better, as I said in the review I did, the Power Rangers Time Force episode Trix Takes a Stand, I still think is the best incarnation of it. But the fact that Spike was able to stick up for Thorax and basically show how he's willing to risk his status in the Crystal Empire to help a friend. And the song, well, not the best song, definitely gets its message across. And I think to see everybody eventually come around on Thorax is definitely very exciting. And it basically shows the biases and racism to show what happens. And even though it is justified through Shining Armor's point of view, that it shows that Thorax is just a sensitive guy, and that not all the changelings are, well, necessarily evil. As I said, this episode does handle it better than Generation 5 did with its movie and its moral, and that racism is bad. And before anybody asks, no, I am not going to be reviewing Generation 5, because I've only seen a handful of episodes, and I basically stopped watching it. But yeah, basically this 22-minute episode handled the serious subject matter on racism a lot better than an hour-and-a-half movie did. And I just think with all those reasons, it just personally hits home for me, and especially how kids need to understand the different unconscious biases and racism, especially nowadays since in 2024, we're still dealing with this issue. And those are the reasons why I think The Times They Are Our Changelings is my favorite episode of Season 6. Alright, we're 2/3 of the way done. I think you know where this all leads to. Next time, we're going to be counting down the top 25 episodes of Friendship is Magic Season 7. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.